Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I hope this is like your 20th episode that you've seen, but just in case it's the first one, I'm Karen E. Osborne. I am author of Getting It Right, Tangled Lies, and next year, Reckonings, which comes out on June 16th. And I am so pleased to introduce you to my guest today. She is just a very prolific and well-regarded author, and she's also someone I have known for, I don't know, like 30 years or so, except we haven't seen each other in that amount of time either. So I'm so honored to be reconnected with Susan C. Shea. Let me just read a little bit about her. So she writes upmarket cozy mysteries, which if that's a new term to you, she's going to explain it to you, and including the Dani O'Rourke Mysteries, which was her first series. And she has 3 books in that series. And the critically acclaimed Love and Death in Burgundy, this is her French series, and her most recent book, Dressed for Death in Burgundy. So don't those titles just entice you? Yeah. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks. It's lovely to see you. Really is. And congratulations on your new book.
Thank you so much. Yes. So when I want you to think back when you were a kid, or you could even think back, you and I both are grandparents. So you might even think back on books that you read to your children or your grandchildren. But what are some of those really influential first books? And at what point did they enter your life?
Well, I'm not going to tell you anything you haven't heard from every other writer. I've read my whole life, been read to before I could read, read to my kids and my grandkids. And the books that I really, everybody goes through the stage of reading all the kids' books. And then, as writers, everybody says, oh, I read Nancy Drew, and that's really true. But the books that stuck out for me when I was a kid were by E.B. White and the author who wrote the Stuart Little books, which I absolutely loved when I was a kid, and which I read to my kids and which I read to my grandkids, along with Charlotte's Web, which E.B. White wrote also. I never can read the end of Charlotte's Web without getting a lump in my throat. So the kids got used to having me kind of choke up at the end of that. So, and I read voraciously, like everybody else, and like everybody else who's a writer, which is the best preparation for becoming a writer. And when I was about 10 or 11, I guess, I graduated from kids' books for the most part to my parents' library. There were no restrictions. I could read they had a library like this, only 10 times as much, and I read anything I wanted. So, I just read.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've interviewed now quite a few authors, and you're right that most of us were readers from, out of the womb almost. Yeah. But I met a couple of writers who really didn't start reading until they were 11 or 12. So that's just kind of interesting, that not everybody's journey is quite the same, but ours is very similar. Although the library that I went to was in about 10 blocks away from where I grew up. My parents didn't own a lot of books, but every Christmas my dad bought me books. That was like a big Christmas present, which I loved. Yeah. So one of the things we like to do is introduce our audience to some books that maybe they haven't had a chance to read, or a book they ought to read again. So do you have any recommendations for us today?
Well, I do. And one of the reasons I do is I was the head of the jury for the Edgars last year, which is the mystery writers top award, and it was for best novel. So I recruited a half a dozen other wonderful writers, members of Mystery Writers of America, And we read 427 books, not all of every book, but we read a lot of books. So I have a lot of recommendations, and the best of the best we decided were the 6 that we chose as finalists for the Oscar for Best Novel. And I really want to recommend the one that won. It's by a woman named Deepa, Anappara, who was a journalist in India. And this is her first novel. It's called The Djinn Patrol on the Purple Line. It's Djinn. Jinns are spirits in India. And she wrote this book that it is crime fiction. It won a lot of awards, which we did not know outside of crime fiction. But then it was also, we decided, the best crime fiction award winner. It's a story of the disappearance of a child and then another child. And it's told from the point of view of a 10-year-old boy who lives in one of these little shanties that in the alleys of big cities in India. You know, you've seen pictures of these. They're just little attachments to the backs of buildings. And the story is told through his eyes, but they're very clear eyes. They're street smart. He's a street smart little boy, but he's still innocent in a lot of ways. And he and his friends decide they're going to try to find this missing child who's a friend of theirs. And the story winds up being not only the story of an individual crime, but the story of a societal crime and corruption in India. And it's a wonderful story. It's very deep, it's very rich, and it's very unusual. You know, I think people were somewhat surprised that we chose it, but I can't recommend it highly enough. The Djinn Patrol on the Purple Line by Deepa Anappara. And anybody who wants to can see the list of the 6 finalists that we chose on the Mystery Writers of America site.
Wow. So thank you for that. That's I'll add that to my list, to my pile of books that I need to read.
It's really worth it.
Tell me though about reading 400 books for, you know, what is truly, well, first of all, what a gift, what a wonderful thing for you to do and your team to do. But what is that like? How many are you reading a day? How does that work?
Well, it really is not quite as frightening as it sounds. When they asked me if I would be the head judge, I thought it was such a great compliment. And then I realized about May or June that they probably asked 20 smarter people than me who turned them down, as my guest room filled up with brand new first edition hardback books. I mean, they just took over. But I had, as I say, recruited a half a dozen writers. We were teams of 2. They were teams of 2. And as these books piled up on my porch and I would bring them in, that people got assigned. You get 5, the next group gets 5, you get 5, and so on. And anytime someone pointed out a book that was particularly good by our scoring system, I would read it or read most of it. So I didn't have to read all of them. And sometimes you read a book and you know, within maybe, I mean, the people who were starting that knew 20, 50 pages in that this just was not going to be the best book of the year. But sometimes if somebody said it was good, I would stick with it for at least half of the book. And occasionally I just found it was too much of this or too little of that, and I wouldn't finish it. But if somebody else recommended it, I had to respect that and really give it a very good shot. So that's how we did it. And then we met together on Zoom and hashed them out and got to 10 finalists. And then we met again and we got down to we were supposed to come to 5, but we couldn't. We came to 6 and they told us it was okay.
That is a wonderful thing. And do people, the 400 or so, where do those recommendations come from?
From their publishers. The publishers submit the books to us, and some of them are some of the publishers are very careful about sending us what they think are really the best books. And other publishers, I'm going to have to say, just threw everything at the wall in the hopes that something sticks, So there were books that I'm sure they were fine books, but they weren't really, they were never going to be in that top group,
Yeah.
But it was fun, and there were lots of good books, and there was only one place this was the pandemic year, so it was perfect timing for it. There was only one place that would take books. So because of the pandemic, so after the year was over, after the awards were announced, I began bringing cartons of these brand new, gorgeous first editions books to the Friends of the Library here in Marin County. And I would pull up in my car every Saturday with another box, and they would go, "What is she bringing us today?"
That's a great story. That's a wonderful, what an honor and what a wonderful gift to writers that you did. Thank you so much. So one of the ways that your writing was described was upmarket, cozy mysteries. Could you give us a definition of that?
I wish I could. Actually, I can tell you what the publisher said. I'm always suspicious of labels that too quickly put a book in a certain bin, and I don't care for that very much. But that's what the publisher does. So they get to make the choice. Cozy. I think everyone would agree that in a cozy mystery, excuse me, it's not a thriller. It's sort of what it isn't. It's not a thriller. You don't know who did it at the beginning. There's not a lot of blood and violence on the screen, if you will, on the page. And there's a puzzle to be solved. And it's not a detective story or a PI story, because the cops come in after the murder has taken place and they're in charge. So that's a different kind of story. The PI is somewhat the same. And in a thriller, you frequently hear the voice of the killer as part of the story. And the business is, will we chase him or her down before they kill the next person?
Again, yeah.
So a cozy is sort of what those things aren't. I think there's a fine line between what I would call a traditional, which is kind of the school of Agatha Christie, although modernized, and the softer ones. Some cozies, and this is not the kind I write, have recipes, or they're very I don't know what to call it. They're super soft, and they're cute. Maybe cute's the word to call it. I think mine actually are a little more like traditionals, but because it was a French village, I think that's why they chose cozy for it, because it's a village mystery. And upscale is because it's France.
Yes. Have you had book talks in wineries and places that are kind of tied to the notion of Burgundy?
Well, actually, a friend of mine, Carol Black, who writes a very long series set in Paris, the Émile Leduc Mysteries, and I have done a lot of together, because she has her city mouse, her private eye in Paris, and I have my country mouse, which is my Catherine down in rural Burgundy. So we do them together, and we do them wherever people will have us. We've done book clubs, and I've done book clubs, and we do bookstores. And when I do bookstores, I try to bring a little French food, of course, a little French chocolate from Burgundy. It has to be from Burgundy in order to be, fit my thing. So I have, whatever and wherever. And we do a lot. I do a lot at conventions and conferences.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So tell us about your latest book, your newest book.
Well, I'm not going to say much about it, and partly that's luck, but I am in the process of reading it out loud, reading the manuscript out loud to myself to catch any flaws in it and to make sure the dialogue sounds normal. And that's why I'm always a little scratchy. And I'm going to get it off to my agent. Today's Monday. I'm going to get it off to her by Wednesday. And I don't want to say too much about it, because it's a standalone, and it's different. And I think it's both serious and funny. I mean, not funny, but it's a serio comedy, I guess is what we call it.
So you're
And
going off on a new, kind of a new direction, a new series.
this was an idea that came to me during the pandemic. It was like a light bulb over my head. And so I just sat down and wrote it in 3 months and sent her a draft. And now I'm working on, a more final book. And I'm also working on another French village mystery, which she really wanted me to do. So I'm working on that too. And that one will be set in Burgundy again, set probably Catherine, who is the main character in the other two, will be more of a sidebar character in this. She will be in it, but she won't be the main character. There's a new character I'm going to introduce.
Oh, nice. A friend of mine who writes mysteries, AJ McCarthy, she calls them spin-offs.
Yeah.
She says, well, she's like, just take a character from one of my previous books and I make that person the bigger character.
Or as the agents say, the same but different.
The same but different. That is
well, you did well, you earned out your advance. Let's do the same but different.
But different. That sounds cool. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I've been playing with it for a while, and I think I have a handle on what will make a good story. So I'm probably about 5 or 6 chapters into that too. But this other one, my light bulb book, took precedence because it was just so much fun. I had to do it.
Wow, that sounds so great. It is a wonderful thing, isn't it? This writing life. It's just so, I mean, you've been doing it a lot longer than I have. I came to it later, but it's just like the most wonderful, fun, interesting, challenging. It's great. My husband says to me, I thought you were retired. I'm not retired. I just have a new profession.
That's what I say. I quit my day job. And when my late partner, who was an artist, said to me, sweetheart, you say you want to write a book, write the book. And I said, well, yeah, but I have to, I have to do this. He said, no. Figure out how much you need in order to be financially secure, not rich, but just secure so you won't panic. And when you hit that number, quit your day job, because otherwise you will always regret that you didn't give a fair shake to your creative style. He had done that when he was 25, so he really knew what he was talking about. And that was, that was really great advice.
That was great advice. That was excellent, both practical and feeding your passion. So that sounds great. So where can our audience find you if they want to find any of the books that are already out? They want to find out more about you, more about, not just your life as a writer, but as somebody who supports writers and tries to get involved and help people. How can people find out more about you?
Well, I have a Susan C. Shea author page on Facebook. And I have a website, which is www.susanczshea.com. And I have on there All Things France, which is a fun section that I just, every once in a while, I put up a post about food or about wine or about places, especially in Burgundy. Well, not completely, but, just to keep that French feeling going. I go to France as often as I can. The last time was 2019. And I'd like to go back when everything clears up. So I have those 2 places, and I have the blog that you're a guest on today, which is 7 Criminal Minds blog, and people can find me there, and you there now.
Excellent. That is wonderful. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad to reconnect with you. And thank you for the support that you gave me, the encouragement that you gave me as I led up to this book. And I thank everybody who is watching and listening. Thank you for joining us. Go out, check out Susan C. Shea, buy her books. And I'll see you next time. What are you reading? What are you writing?